Heyo heyo, eggs and mayo. This is Tess from Shadowcast Studio here with another Storytime speed draw. So for this one, I decided to talk about the anime that changed my brain chemistry. It's one of the longest lasting special interests of mine that's a TV show other than Scooby-Doo. I'm gonna be real with y'all, I think it was Scooby-Doo that made me love horror and murder mysteries. I mean, Only Murders in the Building is just Scooby-Doo but for theater kids, which is why I love it so much. Anyway, I got into this anime series back in the early 2000s. Leading up to that, I have always had a love for 2D animation and comics. I grew up in the Disney Renaissance. Now, in the mid-90s, Sailor Moon was introduced to America, and my tiny kid brain was blown out of the water. And from there, it was Pokemon, Dragon Ball Z, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Yes, Yu-Gi-Oh! Did I stutter? The look, the story content, the imagination behind it all, as a kid who was starting to get bored of the same American animation style, I was hooked. Now, the thing about most of these anime were that in the dubbing, they were localized, meaning through the English script, they took out pretty much all the Japanese context. They changed the characters' names, like Sailor Moon, Usagi was changed to Serena, the places they were going to, animated out cigarettes for lollipops. The two most egregious examples of this were in Pokemon, where Brock calls onigiri jelly donuts, and in Sailor Moon, where Sailor Neptune and Sailor Uranus were changed from, consensual adult lesbian lovers to cousins? Yeah, like most cases, incest doesn't work here. Good grief. I think the other thing about anime that really got Americans' attention was the fact that they had varying age demographics, meaning there were more stories for all age groups. For a long time in America, there were only 3 types of cartoons: preschool children's programs like Magic School Bus, family-friendly cartoons like Disney movies, and adult animation like the Flintstones and Simpsons. And even then, they were mostly family sitcoms. So there was basically nothing for teens and young adults for animation. For anime to include inventive ways of drawing, queer relationships, stories for older audiences, continuous storylines that didn't reset after every episodes, and varying genres are what I think really got Americans into these series. Up until that point, there were very few examples of this from the side of the pond. Like 1994's Gargoyles. Which, yes, I did fall back into that series as an adult, and no, I'm not sorry. And you can see its influence taking hold even in the 90s onward. Hell, one of my favorite series in middle school was Teen Titans, directed by Glenn Murakami. And Avatar: The Last Airbender will always have a special place in my heart, but that's a whole other rant. When I was in middle school, I was gobbling up cartoons and comics. I was even inspired by Captain Underpants and Garfield to draw my own comic strips. Granted, they were only stick figures, but hey, I was having fun. At one point, my older sister was borrowing a manga series from a friend of hers and decided to lend me the first volume of Ranma 1/2. This series was, and is, amazingly funny. 12-year-old me could not get enough. It blended action, comedy, and gender bending so well, and in a way that was not gross. But when my sister, in a panic, realized she handed a 13 and up manga to a 12-year-old, she panicked, snatched the comic away from me, and told me it was too old for me. Ugh, disheartened, I was stripped of this wonderful comic series. But then another series by Rumiko Takahashi would fill the need. I was hanging out with some friends one night, playing video games, singing karaoke, writing fanfic together. Just picture a scene from Turning Red and you'd get the picture. That night, my friends were playing an Inuyasha video game on the computer. When they realized I didn't know what the series was, they were totally aghast and decided they needed to remedy this. Later on a snowy November morning, with my rolling backpack under the light above the doorway, I would meet one of them and they would do just that. I was there early to meet my friends before school, a habit we formed to spend more time together. In between the harshness of middle school life, it was the best thing to do to cling on to your best friends at that point. When one of my best friends came over with a bunch of VHS tapes in his backpack. We are still best friends to this day, and I will never forgive him for getting me into this series. So apparently his cousin got him into this series, and together they got a bunch of other people hooked. Basically, they were peddling this hyperfixation fuel to a bunch of other neurodivergent kids. He hands me these VHS tapes of Inuyasha episodes he had recorded from the TV. Now, this was a thing we all used to do back in the day, where we would put in a blank tape in the VHS player, turn the TV to any channel, and press record to record the episode in progress. My parents did this with Christmas specials, this is what I did with the Pokemon movie, episodes of Friends and Fairly Odd Parents, and this is what my friend did with anime. So he hands me the VHS tapes, tells me to watch them. I watch a couple of episodes, tried to give them back, and he says, no, you can't give them back until you watch all of them. Well, I did, and slowly but surely, it became one of my all-time favorites. I love the series for so many reasons. Is it perfect? No, of course not. There are parts that did not age well, like, Miroku's sexual harassment. Not always the greatest, but for the most part, I think it holds up. It blends together so many genres in such a way it's not jarring. It's part isekai, part historical fantasy, and part urban fantasy with the time well. It combines action, adventure, horror, comedy, all in a great slow burn love story. The characters are well-rounded and not at all flat. There are multiple great female characters, good, evil, and somewhere in between that all have fully fleshed out personalities. Even by today's standards, that's pretty rare. And there's not gratuitous amounts of sexual fan service in your face all the time. There's even a note in the character design sheet for Kagome that says, no shops up her skirt. Yes, that is such a revolution. Thank you. I thank the producers. I thank the team members. I thank the character designers for adding this note every single day of my life. Please do not do panty shots up a middle school / high schooler's skirt. That baffles me that they had to put that there, but I guess they did, so, I even remember this scene where Kagome and Sango are bathing in some hot springs, and instead of taking that into more of a sexual tone, they make it more about characters getting to know each other. Kagome gets to look over at Sango's scars on her back and noting, what happened there, and they talk about Sango's trauma about being betrayed by her brother, her family being slain, and Sango's pain of trying to find someone who refuses to forgive themselves. That's so powerful. It upped my standards of storytelling. Inuyasha is also a Japanese story that is somehow relatable to everyone. You can't Americanize Takahashi stories. They tried a little bit in this series, replacing yokai with demon, which confused the freaking hell out of me as a teenager for no end, but I digress. The rest of the series is untouched. The names, the folklore, all of it is 100% Japanese. Now, this series did turn me into a weeaboo version of Jack Skellington for a few years there. Not proud of that. Now think of Jack's Obsession song mixed with a bunch of broken Japanese phrases. Add in my goth phase into that, and we have my teen years through high school. You're welcome. One of my big special interests, other than animation / comics and biology, is mythology. In middle school, I got my grubby hands on those Dalaris. I can't pronounce that word for word. I'm just gonna put up the image right here. But Dalaris. These books on Greek and Norse mythology. If you know, you know. I was obsessed with them. So to say Inuyasha got me into Japanese mythology is an understatement. Later series like Avatar: The Last Airbender and Hellboy got me into other mythologies around the world, but needless to say, Inuyasha helped me get out of just European mythology. In addition, Inuyasha has great monster designs. All the yokai are taken straight out of Japanese lore, and there's even a few original ones mixed in. One of my favorite designs are those spidery dudes from an early episode. They look so good and kind of remind me of the rat creatures from Jeff Smith's Bone, except they're more gangly and terrifying looking. I love them. This is also when I learned that both Inuyasha and Ranma 1/2 were created by the same person, Rumiko Takahashi. Not only was she a woman making comics, she had made multiple series across different genres: sci-fi comedies, Yorosei Yatsura, slice of life, Maison Ikkoku, action comedies like Ranma 1/2, along with fantasy horror series like Mermaid Saga, which is still one of my favorite series of her to this day, and her pivotal feudal era fairy tale Inuyasha, and so many short stories. She became one of the people I looked up to growing up as a kid. She showed me comics weren't just a boys' club where you could only make Sunday comic strips or superhero comics. It was a place for anyone to tell any kind of story. Over the years, I've been influenced by a lot of other things, including things from my own life, but you can tell this is one of the top series my brain marinated in. You can even see it in the way I draw eyes that Rumiko Takahashi's influence is still there. I'll admit, when I was a kid, I made a chart of the different eye shapes of each of the Inuyasha characters. It was so cool to see the distinct differences that added to their designs. A story like this is why it's so hard for me to define what mood genre my bigger stories fall into, because a story with horror, comedy, action, and romance feels so well-rounded to me. These genres balance themselves out, like a sandwich. You add in all these elements and it makes like this bountiful, flavorful snack. Yes, I love sandwiches. Yes, it's one of my favorite foods. I'm living my best life. I also add in a variety of female characters with different ways of being badass because of Inuyasha. I expect that now, and when I don't see it in the media I consume, well, I make my own. I even add little hints and nods to Inuyasha and other stuff I love in my series, like Legend Catcher. If you don't know, Legend Catcher is an urban fantasy series about a mythos biologist named Fitzwilliam O'Reilly. Along with the Hailstorm Agency, they catch and study monsters instead of slaying them. I love a character with a distinct visual design who's an outcast, but has a found family. I did add a little bit of Sango's demon exterminator design in Fitz's suit, not gonna lie, and I did drop a sketch of a demon slayer in one of my chapters where Lee and John are smithing Fitzwilliam's new metal body. It's one of those silly headcanons I have where Lee found this painting and said, "Huh, this looks cool." In the chapter I'm working on right now, there's even a little half yokai cat named Jingles, who's half Nekomata and half Japanese bobtail. Shout out to one of my favorite Hanyo boyos! And every time she wiggles her tails to work her magic, they make a jingling sound. I love it. It's a dumb joke that I just really appreciate. Once I finish the chapter, it'll be up on my site, legendcatcher.com, in the chapter shop. You can even check out the rest of the story there. I will warn you, this is a series that is rated 18 and up for violence, sexual content, and swearing, so just gonna put it out there. And I will say, there is a whole chapter featuring a demon's butt. Need I say more? In a nutshell, Inuyasha was the anime series that got me into historical and urban fantasy, expanded my love of monsters, took my special interest of mythology out of Europe, gave me one of my first female idols of the comic industry, and influenced my art style. In high school, I was made fun of for liking this series, so it became this shameful thing for a long time until I reached adulthood. Now when I meet people who are longtime fans or people who are just getting into the series, it brightens my day and makes me so happy. Now in this picture, I decided to draw a calm, rainy scene. At first I was going to draw Inuyasha and Kagome, but instead focused on my favorite couple in the series, Moroku and Sango. Not gonna lie, I love the pairing of a badass lady/person who's too busy for romance, and the sexual deviant/hopeless romantic who pines for them. This is probably why I love Mermista and Seahawk from She-Ra so much. Now, when painting the background for this scene, I do a lot of finagling. I usually finagle for a lot of backgrounds because I try to give it more of an imperfect, painterly feel to add to the synergy with a cel-shaded, well-constructed character in the front. So it's a lot of trial and errors, it's a lot of figuring out the atmospheric perspective and figuring out which texture works best, and I think it turned out pretty okay in this scene. And I try to keep it desaturated without making it grayscale because usually with rain, it just sort of takes a lot of color out for most environments. I added in Shippo and Kilala hanging out by the pond just to add some life on the other side of this picture instead of leaving it empty. I love Kilala's design, and the fact she can turn into a giant, burning, flying saber-toothed tiger is just so badass. If you aren't impressed by a woman flying around on a giant saber-toothed cat, you're not right in the head. But overall, I like how this picture turned out. I hope this series brings you as much joy as it did to me. Have a great day, everyone. Enjoy your cup of ramen noodles, and please stop abusing the Sip Boy curse. It's ruining the sidewalks. I'm already clumsy enough. I can't trip on a man-shaped hole in the ground again. Now, in the mid-90s, Sailor Moon was introduced to America, and my tiny kid Blaine... Blaine? Who's Blaine? Jeez. So there was basically nothing for teens and old... Let me try that again. Didn't reset after every episode, and varying degrees are what I think... That didn't sound right. Okay. When one of my best friends came over with a bunch of VHS tapes. Sorry about that. They took a moment to talk about Sango's trauma of losing her family to Naraku's. I love a character with a distinct visual design who's an outcast but has a found family. I added. Okay. And every time she wiggles her tails to work her magic. Why did I put that there in the script? Jiminy crackers. Okay. Fixed it. I'm trying with grammar. My autism did not give me grammar points, so forgive me for my bad grammar. Okay, I can do this. Okay, I can do this. I have so many run-on sentences in this. I can do this. In high school, I was made fun of for liking this series, so it became this shambling-dangle.